Why would the song just end like that? That's not right. There we are. Hi, everybody. Welcome to the show. Good to see you. Good morning. Hello. Hi. How you doing? All right. What's going on, folks? Mic is okay. Sound is all right. I don't know how choppy we'll be. 1% dropped frames. I've seen worse. We'll manage. I'm only using 30% of the CPU in this situation. This mic. There you go. Light is a little hot. That's better. Hi, how you doing? Great show last night at the Jam. Crazy. Robbie Krieger from the Doors showed up and performed and did three Doors songs on one of them. Two of them were sung uh, ably and amazingly by Brett Copeland, who just killed it. But Dennis Quaid hopped up on stage um, and uh, and did a song, which was fantastic. Did a Doors song, and what like just not what I was expecting at all. Just it was really like that was just a special plus. And then also somebody dropped out singer wise. We were short a singer, and so I had to do Ace of Spades last minute, which is a good time. I mean it's a bit like gargling clamshells, but I've been known to do that before or whatever. And I gotta say we ended with Motley Crue's Home Sweet Home last night, and I think it might be the best I've ever sang it. I mean, not that I've sung it a lot, but I've done it like three times probably in public in the last, since it came out in '86 or whatever. What are the doors? They're the things you use instead of a window to leave a house. So happy hump day. It's true. One hump or two. I think you know. Um, we have a bunch of news to cover today, but I think the biggest one, if I may, and let me see if I can drag this little thing over here, move this around, and move this thing. Okay, that's good. Hide this guy. Close that settings. Um, is that Kevin McCarthy um, is not going to run. He's quitting the Congress at the end of the year. He's not even going to wait. Um, yeah, he's out. Um, hold on a second. We'll do it in here. Yeah, let me see if I can find the actual Kevin McCarthy. Um, yeah, there it is. It's all over the place. Yep, there we go. Hold on one second. And before I get to that, well, here it is. I'll just jump over to it with all my pages showing and flailing about and whatnot. Um, Here it is. There you go. That's There he is, ladies and gentlemen. Kevin McCarthy to leave Congress at the end of this year with a tail between his legs. Tail between his legs. Um, Kevin McCarthy will be resigning from Congress after 2 decades to somewhere near that in Congress. Couldn't happen to a nicer guy. Also, no idea what his plans are after this. If he and John Boehner are gonna settle down in a weed business or something, or maybe he'll go back to Bakersfield and grow a business. I don't. What's the biggest crime in Bakersfield right now? Is it murder for hire? I don't quite know what the job market is in Bakersfield these days, but I'm sure he'll do fine, or whatever. Because no thanks. Um, yeah. Ba-doom. Um, 17 years. That's how long he's been in. There you go. McCarthy, who battled through 15 grueling rounds to win the Speaker's gavel in January, battled through it. He didn't battle through it. He just had different stages of surrender. The battle was just about how much he was willing to give up, not what he was going to fight for. Are you nuts? Love this. I never could have. Yeah. Um, this is his statement. No matter the odds or personal cost, we did the right thing. That may seem out of fashion in Washington these days, but delivering results for the American people is still celebrated across the country. I never could have imagined the journey when I first threw my hat in the ring. I go knowing I left it all on the field, as always, with a smile on my face, and looking back, I wouldn't have had it any other way. Okay, first of all, bullshit. Get out of here. Of course, you would have had it a dozen other ways. Like, what? Just the and by the way, I have to say, not to toot my own horn, which can cause lower back problems. Um, but this is a guy who uh, there was no there ever, and every time and I struggled to figure out a way to kind of make comedy out of just how like third grade substitute teacher he sounded. But that's pretty much like my reading of how he said that is pretty much how he talked all the time. It was this weird mix of like teachers, teacher like condescension. You know what I mean? This kind of weird, like, I'm not going to be here for long, but when I am, in the spirit of the movie Seven, you're going to see more of these. Yes, you are. Absolutely. And by the way, I'm sorry the chat moves very slowly at this point. It's one of the weirdest things about it. I just don't, maybe I can't figure out why the that part. I might have to use a browser source. I could possibly do it. Ah ha ha. Hold on one second. That this may solve the problem, or it could make it worse. So there's that. Give me one second. I'm gonna try and get the chat in here so I can at least see you guys. Okay, go to settings and go to stream. Browsers, perhaps the browser source. I just well, this is stupid. Why don't I just grab this? Um, and then I go to here, and then I go to studio mode, and then I go to me in the chat because there you are, and then I add a source, which would be a browser source, and then in that browser source I go chat, and then OK, and then make it 600 by 900, let's just say, and then I'll throw this in here, paste, OK, and then da 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 da. I don't know. Oh, and then I have to. You rat. That won't work. Okay. Bed in stream, bitch. Um, copy. Let's see, bitch. Maybe I know what I could do. Maybe launch it. Do you deliver separate launch? This is so annoying. Um, try this one. Copy, and maybe that'll do it. I'm just trying to. Oh, maybe not. It only does. Because for some reason, like there we go. That's a little better, a little less terrible as far as its slowness. Um, mm-hmm. Oops. Could that be it? Oh, maybe. There we go. And sorry, I'm just messing around with some stuff because it's just how it works. Um, there you go. Hopeful. Let's see if maybe this works a little bit. How about that? It's a little better, maybe. Okay, it needs to move down a little bit. That's pretty good. And shrink it a touch. Oh, that's good. Yeah. And then, yeah. So what happens if I kill this and then it's dark behind it and what have you? And there you go. This funkiness. Yeah. All right. That kind of works. It's not quite as attractive, but it moves a lot better than the one I had there previously, except it doesn't. Now it's frozen again. I don't understand. I'm going to keep trying. Anyways, like, subscribe, give a thumbs up, support the show. Help me build a bigger road rig because I'm going to need one. But piece by piece, we'll get through this. Um, Ta-da! You can't hear me? You can't everybody hear me? Audio's okay? Am I quiet? Is that what the thing is? We'll figure it out. In the meantime, though, McCarthy gone, gone. Woohoo! So, and then let's see if I turn this up. There you go. There's a chat room. Now I can see it. Now it's moving again. Low, but you can hear. Okay, excellent. I'll try and improve it over the next because I have a show. Hal needs Johnny the tech guy. I so do. In the meantime, hold on. We'll grab this over here. Let me. There's even more ridiculousness. Is this one's pretty hilarious. Trump says he told Eric not to testify. His young life has been unfairly disturbed, and unfairly disturbed is a great way for the I guess the Trumps to discuss themselves in general as a group. Um, I'm unfairly disturbed. It's so unfair. How fucking nuts I am. I love that there's this weird staring straight ahead smiley shot of Eric, and over his shoulder is, if you notice, a can of a man who looks like he has a thing of Purell for a penis. It's so odd. And then a cop on the other side. Right here. Good times. Pretty hilarious. Um this he posted this because he told him not to testify, apparently. Where is it? This is yeah, he wrote this on Truth Central. I told my wonderful son Eric not to testify tomorrow at the rag trial brought by AG Letitia James' campaign promised that without knowing anything about me, I will get Trump. She ran for AG, then governor of New York, and lost. She's, yeah. Trump wrote on his social media, Eric has already testified perfectly, unlike the star witness who admitted he lied on your behalf. He's talking about Cohen. So there's no reason to waste any more of this crooked court's time on having him say the same thing over and over again as a witness for the defense. Us, in case you were wondering. Because he's the one who sort of attacked the financial system of New York. So he thinks of himself as like they're the defense. They're on the defense. Just in case you don't think they're on the defense. And his young life has already been unfairly disturbed and disrupted enough on this corrupt witch hunt, Trump wrote late Tuesday. Besides, I will be testifying on Monday in this shameful, no jury allowed trial. Happy banks and insurance companies, no victims, great financial statements, perfect disclaimer clause, but a corrupt attorney general and judge. Multiple exclamation points. Yeah, I mean, this is the meltdown. Also, after Trump's screw up saying, they would effectively, that he was engaged in an attack on democracy, he put out this statement that, no, Biden's attacking democracy. And then Sean Hannity attempts to pitch cleanup for him, get him to say, I'm not going to be a dictator. That's ridiculous. That's hyperbole. What I'm going to do is do things right, and he couldn't even get that shit right. Nope. We'll cover that later this afternoon. There will be a regular show this afternoon, and I think it's very important that we cover just the amount of just flailing that Trump is doing. Unfairly Disturbed is the name of my new band. It's a good punk band, I think. Also, Norman Lear passed, which is very sad, at 101, which is not. Also, yes, Eric, young life, because Trump, here's why. Why is Trump saying young life about Eric? Well, two reasons. One is to create the ongoing illusion that they're attacking my children as if they're all Barron's age. And so therefore, if you can, you can kind of float this myth, they're going after his children, like even his attorneys have said this, like they're in their 40s. Fuck off. And by the way, if they're going after his children, leave Hunter Biden alone then. Jesus Christ, they're all basically the same age. Yeah, just a ton of dumb. Just a ton of it these days. And hold on. I don't know why these other LA's done. Let's see if we can pull this up. There's McCarthy announcing his thing. Oh God. Here's I have another question. I have another question about the Israel Gaza thing that doesn't seem to come up. We talked about yeah, day before yesterday, we talked about, and I'm glad, by the way, that there's some attention being paid to the sexual violence that was perpetrated on Israeli and Arab and international women, women of all sorts and ages, children, including a woman who was sexually assaulted and shot in the head while it was happening. Bodies that were so decimated they couldn't tell if they were male or female because after the act they had fired into them so much. Just hideous. Like any of these people who are like, like Hamas Abi and all these folks that are just kind of equivocating right now. I think they should, if they, here's the thing, if somebody is talking about this issue and they've seen like the bombed buildings and they've seen Hamas's pictures that they send out, um, if they've seen that, but they haven't watched the video that Hamas put out and that was put out of the victims on October 7th, then they aren't worth listening to. It's that simple. That's all I'm saying. Like you if they still draw the same conclusions, then that just tells you who they are or whatever. But if they haven't watched it, that's my bone to pick with Amy Goodman right now, who I adore on Democracy Now. Amy Goodman has not watched the Hamas videos that they put out and stuff that happened on October 7th. None of it. She's, insofar as I know. Um, and at least the last I heard, she hadn't. And she hasn't changed it or changed how she talked about anything since then. So, in the last month and a half. So, if somebody hasn't watched that stuff and all they have seen is kind of like the targeted strikes of buildings inside Gaza and stuff, which again is a part of the conversation, must be a part of the conversation about an ultimate peace and the safety of the Palestinian people and getting aid to them without it being stolen by Hamas and used to fill the bellies of rapists and murderers instead of the people it's supposed to be aimed at. Like that, all of that has to be part of the conversation. But if that's all the input and they're not including what happened on October 7th and they haven't, like I said, watched it, it's all over the Hamas Telegram channels. I know they have access to it. If I've seen it, they can see it. And if it doesn't change your mind, then that's part of the conversation as well. Then that person should have I guess, the fortitude, if you can call it that, to say, yes, I watched what happened on October 7th, but I still believe that, da da da. Then, okay, that at least tells me who you are and what your take on this stuff is. This is like New York Times and Washington Post have been quite odd about a lot of this stuff. And I wanted to point this out real quick. And this is very similar to the kind of stuff we heard about like Russia and and the attack on Ukraine and specifically the pre-Bucha, where there were still people floating the idea that it was NATO expansion 8 years ago. Somebody brought up the fact that eventually Ukraine might be in NATO, possibly someday, maybe. And 8 years later, Vladimir Putin woke up and went, "Oh shit, what time is it?" And just decided he had to send serial killers and murderers and prisoners into the country to just slaughter people because there's like a statute of limitations on fear about possible NATO expansion. And again, NATO is a voluntary organization that countries join. All the expansion is people joining. All right. And whereas you'll hear a lot of people talk about NATO expansion who are against it in terms of it being like forced baptism or something. Like you got to acquiesce or they'll kill you, which is not even anywhere close to true. I mean, the Finns and the Swedes didn't join until recently. And was there a point where they were in danger of being taken over by the United States or any other European country? It's just absurd. Anyways, so this is and by the way, hold on, chat room. I want to look at what you're saying real quick, because it's just part of the conversation. Again, I'm not telling you how to think. I'm telling you what to add to your thinking. Does that make sense? Just always, yeah. So you want, as rough as it may be, you want as much information in your decision making about stuff or in how you're going to feel or approach an issue. and a lot of the writing I'm seeing about this right now is odd because it does not realize the rake it is walking into. And this is a good example, as good an example as any. Israel touts civilian warning system, but for Gazans, no one is safe. Um, this is, Israel is effectively saying, look, we're going to let you know when we're going to hit a building, and um, the why is nowhere safe in this regard? Is it because the Israelis say they're going to bomb one building and then they bomb a bunch of other buildings without warning? No. Is it because they miss? No. Is it because their targeting system is just sort of blatant, or they're herding people into this area? They're giving a civilian warning where we're going to hit here, we're not going to hit here, and then they herd the people into there and then they hit here? No. What they mean for Gazans nowhere is safe is because they are squished between Hamas and Israel. And that when Israel says this is a place we're going to hit, which has got a military valued target in it or around it, or an entrance to the tunnels or an exit to the tunnels or a both, or a rocket launching site or any of that kind of stuff, Hamas basically with guns makes people not able to leave in those areas. This would, if you read this title, if you read just the headline, it would seem like what I said initially, which is like Israel just is like flattening. Everyone just doesn't give a shit. They're just, and you hear indiscriminate bombing all the time. You hear that phrase, which isn't true. It just frankly is not. And this is, and again, any system can be. There are mistakes. There are bad judgments. All that kind of stuff. It's happening in any war that's ever happened, in any situation. It doesn't forgive it, but you deal with it in a different way than intentional wrongs, right? You can tighten a system so that you make fewer mistakes. If they're not mistakes, then you can deal with those people because they did something wrong, right? These are two separate solutions because these are two separate problems. Okay, on a military base in the center of a biblical desert city, Israeli officials sit in a small control room lined with maps and monitors, charged with directing the movement of panicked citizens in war-ravaged Gaza. On Monday, beneath a digital diagram of the strip, data analysts, lawyers, and Arabic translators surrounded an army officer. He had phone numbers for military leaders, tank commanders, and tens of thousands of civilians in Gaza, including the southern city of Khan Yunis, where Israeli bombs rained down and ground forces will later enter. Okay, they didn't rain down. And like even that description, think about what that brings to your mind. Like they're hitting specific places, or you wouldn't see any buildings in the background of this stuff. Believe me, the volume of missiles available to Israel or any country aligned with the United States or China or Russia has plenty of missiles to flatten a place like Gaza, the entire place. And again, this is because, and I can say this because my president is actively, through Antony Blinken and others, working to make sure that the Israeli government isn't as indiscriminate as perhaps Netanyahu would like to be. That matters. Matters to me. It matters to most Americans. With rare exception, there seemed to be an overlap of far left and far right that it's just about who should be completely wiped out, not that it's bad that people are completely wiped out. But um, the idea that they rain down creates indiscriminate that's indiscriminate languaging. And I will say, if many of us recall shock and awe, remember the Bush doctrine of shock and awe, and that this is how they were going to lead the attack in Iraq in the beginning, when many of us, myself included, and I think probably most of the chat room, was against war with Iraq, period, in the beginning. I would argue that to some degree, shock and awe was certainly targeted, but was much more akin to, quote, raining down bombs on places in particularly Baghdad than what's happening here. Does that make sense? Um, Hold on, I'm going to check in with the chat room real quick. Where are they supposed to go? They have, Eileen, they have very specific go zones. There is a map put out by the Israelis that has been given to everywhere that has big safe areas that are not hit, that are not targets. They had to, because Hamas moved into one of the areas, they had to move the exit road from the center of Gaza to the border, to the basically walking along the ocean. But that's the only change insofar that I know about. But they have specific areas that will not be touched, that are where they get refugee services, where the UN can bring in goods and that kind of stuff. That is ongoing. That is where they're supposed to go. Um, and by the way, the U.S. and the Brits and the French dropped leaflets um, during World War II. And there were leaflets dropped during the Korean War and the Vietnam War and the like. There are no leaflets the other direction. And the other thing, too, is that on this statement, okay, this is Israel touts civilian warning system, but for Gazans, nowhere is safe. According to the leaders of Hamas, Sinwar in particular, and apparently his second in command was killed um, just recently, 2 days ago. There's footage of him being brought in, and I'll show you that in a second if I can, of him being brought in an ambulance to a hospital. And the distinct difference between the hospital he is brought to and the hospital that Palestinians are, you see Palestinians being brought to in other places. Number one, he's brought in through an underground pass, whereas everybody else, you see them running in front doors of buildings holding people in their arms. He's brought in a, there are people in uniform pushing everybody back. I'll show you that in a minute. But the color-coded map purported to show where more than 2 million Gazans, 80% of them displaced, were sheltering. Using airdropped leaflets, calls, and texts, and informed by knowledge of battle plans, these technicians tell desperate families where they should go next. The Israeli Defense Forces points to the system as proof that it is fulfilling its obligation under international law to minimize civilian casualties. It's one of the smartest rooms in the IDF, said an Israeli official who spoke on condition of anonymity. But the experience of civilians in Gaza revealed the limits of these efforts as Israel presses forward with an all-out war against militants in a densely packed enclave with no escape. Okay, again, this is another one of the phrases. If Israel is conducting a genocide and has been for years, then how did it get densely packed? How has the population grown, doubled effectively in the last 15 years? If the point of what Israel wants to do is a genocide. And by the way, this is they used to occupy parts of Gaza. They no longer do. They left, I think it was in 2003 or 2005. And then there was a dust up in 2014, so they pushed in a little bit in 2015, and then they came out again, and they haven't been in since. Densely packed. You don't get densely packed if you're not allowed to live, procreate, and what have you. The only reason like Auschwitz and Dachau and places like that were, quote, densely packed is because they were bringing train loads of more people in a very small camp. So it's just important in how, just watch how the languaging about this is used. Okay. Densely packed enclave with no escape. Now, why can't they escape into Egypt? The Israelis are probably against the idea of a free flow of Palestinians into their territory, especially considering what happened on October 7th. But why is an exit into Egypt, into the Sinai, off the table? Unless, like I said on Monday, Egypt is as complicit and as much of a partner in the quote-unquote open-air prison idea as Israel is. And if they are, why are that never brought up? Is it because the Egyptians aren't Jews and it makes it more complicated? And then you have to realize there's geopolitical reasons in there as opposed to just something you can write off as hate. Okay. Which humanitarian leaders have likened to hell on earth. Okay. These humanitarian leaders who are likening this to, quote, hell on earth. Most of these people have not talked about Sudan before October 7th for the last 5 months while the slaughter has been going on. And there is an argument that if there is ever a hell on earth, it does not involve coordinated no-go zones and travel, relative safe travel passage from one hotspot to another while one military goes after, tries to do targeted strikes on militants in a particular area, making sure that the people that are fleeing those areas are not subject to abject violence and especially sexual violence. Sudan, that's just off the fucking charts. Like, if you're going to talk about hell on earth, why why is no one applying that to the discussion? And again, these are important parts, I think, of just categorically how I see the conversation going about this. And this is not, no fan of Netanyahu, and certainly think he needs to go. And I think in many ways, more than likely, that this whole idea that they had the plan a year ago and they knew, but they wrote it off or whatever, and military leaders didn't send it up the chain because it was a pie in the sky because they said six. It basically they multiplied their attack points by 10, and that made the Israeli government go, "Oh, this is far too grandiose. They'd never be able to pull this off. They'll never be able to break 60 points in the line." Well, they broke, three, uh, like, I suppose if they broke six, it would be, the factor of 10. And they only broached half of that I'm aware of. It may have been four, whatever, but where they got through the walls and then they cut the fences in some places. They flew over them in their little paragliders and shit like that. Okay. The Gaza Health Ministry says nearly 16,000 people, the majority of them women and children, have been killed since Israel launched its attacks 2 months ago in retaliation for Hamas rampage on October 7th. Okay. The Gaza Health Ministry is run by Hamas. And usually we see, like, when Israel says how many people they've killed, they'll be either verified by the news source, like the Washington Post. They'll say, yeah, that's how many people died. Or that can't be verified. There was a moment where they were kind of saying, at least adding on to the Gazan, the health ministry, because it's a Hamas linked organization. This is not the Palestinian Authority. This isn't the PLO. This isn't UN. This is the Gaza Health Ministry. This is Hamas listing this number, saying 16,000 people. The majority of them women and children have been killed. And again, the number of dead and the people that they show, even when they say this, vast majority of them are men. Vast majority of the people in the hospitals are men. And again, this does not write off the women and children that are in harm's way and that are killed. And again, largely by Hamas not letting them exit. But this number is their number. It doesn't make it true. And I see it breathlessly reported all the time without at least saying we can't verify these numbers. This is, Hamas runs the Gazan health ministry, so take it with a grain of salt. But these are the same people who said that China only had 4,000 dead people from fucking COVID. So anyways, here we go. Gazans reached the Washington Post, Gazans reached by the Washington Post say Israel's high-tech system has been no match for the brutal reality of its military campaign. In the chaos of combat, Israeli directives are confusing, vague, or contradictory, they said, often sending them from one battlefield to another. That's not because of Israel. That's because Hamas gets the same leaflets and the same texts. So they move, continuing to use the Palestinians as cover. That's why it's one battlefield to the next, because they fire rockets and rocket-propelled grenades from there at Israeli forces. That's why it's one battlefield to another, because Hamas is constantly moving with them. This footage, I mean, they're proud of it. Hamas posts this stuff on their Telegram channels. If I showed you any of it on my channel, it would get me shut down. You can't show it. But if that is a rabbit hole you can stomach, I recommend it, so you can see what's actually occurring there. Because it is Hamas who is continuing to box these folks in. Just saying. Hold on. Let's see. 8 minutes to stop there. Thank you so much. Excellent. Okay. Thanks. CSL. All right. And then again, we go from these kind of broad accepting Hamas's numbers, all this kind of stuff in this article. And this is a critique of the journalism about it, not the existence of the Washington Post or the trend of the Washington Post. And as a matter of fact, I think the vast majority of the journalists talking about this mean well and are affected by what they're seeing. The problem is they saw October 7th happen, and to their mind, it's over, as if Hamas declared a ceasefire instead of just retreated with hostages and was driven out, or largely, if they stayed on that side of the wall, were killed. And and to their mind, even though Hamas still is launching rockets into Israel all the time, constantly now, still, there is this odd sort of mental descriptor that they all seem to use, that October 7th happened, and then October 8th there was like a Hamas ceasefire. Like, oh, okay, do over, we're going back to base. And other than our leader saying we'll do this again and again and again until Israel is destroyed and all the Jews die, it doesn't mean it. They just went back to words. Whereas the Israeli attack, because it's a sustained attack, because it has to be to extract Hamas in this situation, is the ongoing offensive, instead of being a counteroffensive, instead of being a defensive maneuver. Does that make sense? And again, this is how I'm hearing people talk about this stuff. Let me check in with the chat real quick, see what your thoughts on it. Yeah, it's awful, the whole thing. Agreed. It's all BS. Fuck with so-called safe zones, in my opinion. There's two demons fighting one another. I just wish the Palestinians could fight back from Israel and Hamas. You mean fight Israel and Hamas? Well, again, you've got in latest polling, and again, you have to take this with a grain of salt. It's like Russians being asked how they feel about Vladimir Putin, but because some of them may feel good about him because they like a macho leader, and some of them may not feel safe to say the truth, right? And I would argue that in these situations, anecdotal stories and polling are both completely unhelpful, because there is because in the mind of people listening and um kind of processing this, they think of it sort of in the same way that we have polling going on, like political polling in our nation, which is, you know, relatively reliable. Even when people like Trump are buying better Washington, like our Wall Street Journal polling, they literally are paying for good polls within the Trump organization. You still can either shrug it off, take it for a grain of salt, take it with a grain of salt, but you can at least go, all right, the people that they talk to are either being honest about their opinion or feel they can be honest about their opinion. And if there's like a 5% to 8% kill ratio on people trolling or being full of shit or not, or confused about what the question was, where you write that off. And that's why there's a 3 to 5% plus or minus on most of the polling in the United States all the time, because we have the right to troll and we have the right to fuck with people who call our house and ask us polling questions. We don't have to be honest about it and none of that stuff, but we're not afraid to say what we want to say. Now, I don't doubt that there's some Glenn Beck viewers and people like that who are like, if I say the real thing, the NSA's listening to all this and Joe Biden's shock troops are going to get me. I'm sure there's some of those folks, but they're so fucking minor, and they're lunatics anyways, who probably aren't going to vote, so you don't even have to factor them in. But you can basically count on that any errors that are made in the polling about an issue or a political candidate or something social or anything in the United States, or you know the margin of error is legit. Does that make sense? It's human error. It's based on just people being full of shit or confused. When you poll Gazans or you poll Russians about the attack on Ukraine or whatever, you're not going to get a baseline enough to get an honest poll anyways, ever. Because there's a huge statistically significant amount of people who don't feel safe to say the truth, and a huge number of people who are specifically kept ignorant by the people in charge so that they don't have access to just the myriad of fucking the fire hose of news that we all get, right? So they grow up like religious Orthodox Jesus camp Christians to some degree, and you're asking them about, well, just how flat is the earth? Like they could throw down on that for a while, right? The past is more reliable than polls. If I read between lines, yeah. Well, that's sort of the situation we're in too, because you'll find out how the Palestinians really felt about this when this settles down and whatever the next step is. And the problem is that previously, after Yasser Arafat and Menachem Begin and the whole attempts at two-state solutions, and even the one Clinton was talking about, that the result was the leadership of the Palestinian Authority or the Palestinian Liberation Organization or any variants of them, those folks, after there was either some sort of initial attempt at a truce, an initial attempt at a two-state solution, and then that fell apart or whatever, the fallback of the like especially the Gazans was to adapt to Hamas's ideology, and you get, like I said, it's unreliable, but you're getting 51%, 58% thinking, yeah, we got to wipe out Israel and blah blah. Well, again, that's been part of Hamas's strategy. Raise those people to behave that way. Philip Itner is going to join us here in just a second. I'm going to bring him in, and this is the same thing I think we deal with when we talk about the folks that are, I guess, on in Russia, who don't know America from a hole in the wall reason. I think for about it, right? Scene. That's very weird. Let's go there as this wakes up, and I'll bring in. There we go. hmm there we go. There we go. There we go. And I see Phil, and that's good stuff. I hear ya. And he's popping through because he's in the. Oh, I see. Because they put in there. Hold on one second. And there he is. Hey, Phil. Welcome to the show. Good to see you. Hi. Good morning, sir. Okay, hold on one second. One moment. He should get my. There we go. This guy. Now he can hear me, I believe. You hear me now? Can you hear me now? Hopefully. We'll see. Check, check, check one, check two, check three. I just put it through there. Should. Default. There we go. Let's just go to this one. Check, check, check one, check two. Nope, you don't have to swap anything. I mean, it might be on your end that you're not hearing anything, period. It could be that, but nope. Do you see audio coming from me? Is that the thing? Hold on. Check, check. Because I am definitely sending audio at this point. Um, let's try this and then back again. Check, check. Oh, I guess not. That's weird. Is there a odd thing about this? One moment. That's on my end. Apologies. Yes, it is. It's good stuff. Check, check, check one, check two. Um, it could be that this is just being a jerk. It's entirely possible. Um, yeah, let's see. I'm gonna check. No, well, it might be on your end. Yes. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Give me a second. Yeah, I can't tell if it's coming back through here. We'll punt him through there and we'll see after this. Um, give me a split second. Frozen buffered for a minute. It might be um, just trying to bring in guest audio video on this one. Hopefully, and I'll check, check one, check two. I don't know if nope, you still don't hear me? Nope. You hear anything there? Does he hear anything there? Still not hearing me there? All right. Give me 1 second. Let me reload. And it might be on my end. That's the other thing too. It's the funky. That's the funkiness. Enable directors icon and everything. Yeah, it's just weird. I don't see it going in there. Oh yeah, now I do. There we go. Yep, there we go. Excellent. Okay, cool. So let me bring Philip in here, and now we'll be able to. There he is, ladies and gentlemen. Phil Itner joining us from Ukraine right now. And I was talking, Phil. Thanks for being here. I appreciate it. And I was talking before you came on about the coverage of what's going on with Israel and Gaza and all this stuff, and sort of the parallels between some of the dismissiveness of how the Ukraine attack was taken afterwards, and even around when discoveries like Bucha were made, and sort of this fallback into, well, but NATO and blah blah blah. There was a little bit of like, they have moments of clarity, and then they fall back into this. But it really should be a peace process, and shouldn't the Ukrainians have don't they have a responsibility to come to the table? Um, yeah.
When this whole thing began, there were those who were saying that
Mm-hmm.
the cause of the war was NATO expansion.
Right.
NATO expansion didn't have anything to do with this
Right.
war. NATO, no, this has been a conflict that's been going on between Ukraine, a
Mm-hmm.
colonized land,
Right.
uh, subjected by its imperial ruler since the 18th century.
Right.
This is Taras Shevchenko being chucked into a jail for writing a poem in Ukrainian in 1846. This isn't NATO, but
Mm-hmm.
this is a nice, convenient way to shift the responsibility and the blame for whatever conflict
Mm-hmm.
happens. And I agree with you. I see it happening, in the Middle East now.
Mm-hmm.
But it's an opportunity to shift the blame and the responsibility from the actual perpetrator and the actual instigator of war
Right.
to somebody more palatable to the people who, I mean, let's just say it how it is, hate the West.
Right.
They hate America. They hate the West. They're either they're self-loathing or they have maneuvered themselves into a moral position where because the West is powerful,
Mm-hmm.
that by default they're the bad guys. They're
Right.
always the bad guys. Um, the responsibility for this war, in my mind, lies solely with Moscow. Um,
Mm-hmm.
just there is no other. There
Right.
is no other. There is no other instigator.
Mm-hmm.
Ukraine was invaded.
Yeah.
The argument about the Donbass is false.
Mm-hmm.
The argument about language laws or whatever was false,
Mm-hmm.
and now it ironically is manifesting because of the war. But when the war began in 2014, because that's when the war started.
Mm-hmm.
War didn't start in 2022. War started in 2014.
Yeah.
Um, they scrambled to find any reason whatsoever. The thing, and again, I'm always a little bit reluctant to talk about the Middle East,
Mm-hmm.
especially the conflict
Yeah.
in Gaza, because it's not my area of expertise. I've been there a few times.
Right.
I spent about a 5 to 8 year period where I was flying in and out of that part of the world.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I certainly have my credentials when it comes to Iraq, but Iraq is not the conflict in Israel, and again, between the Palestinians and um,
Right.
the citizens of the state of Israel. So, but anyhow, so I'm a little reluctant to go into it in great depth. But what I can certainly say is I do see the similarities between this kind of mentality of, we have to blame, uh, we have to blame the Western aligned or
Right.
the more powerful of the two. And I mean,
Well, there
this
isn't there
the
certain
the
like,
conflict that's
yeah.
happening now started because of what happened on the 7th.
Yeah.
The war in Ukraine happened because Moscow decided after the Maidan revolution in 2014 to invade Ukrainian land because they were afraid of losing Crimea.
Right.
That's it. That's it. Those are the reasons. The
Yeah.
ultimate reason. Everything else, of course, there's history and there's stuff that connects it all, and
Right.
there's a road that leads, one consequence leads to another. But at one point, you take responsibility for your actions, and
Yeah.
the Russians invaded here, and Hamas killed a whole bunch of people
Well,
on the
let
7th.
me show. I made reference to this earlier. A Hamas leader was killed in he's, I guess, Sinwar's second in command. Think of him as the Prigozhin. Although I would argue that Sinwar, the head of Hamas, is a Prigozhin in and of his own right. But to Vladimir Putin's, you know, if Sinwar is Putin in this case, this guy was the Prigozhin of this situation. Although he was technically more like Shoigu, I guess. He was second. He was literally, in charge. Um, here, and I want everybody to picture all the footage you have seen of people, dirty clothing, carrying children or other people into a hospital by hand that you've seen on the news. Again, breathlessly reporting the deaths of civilians that I would argue are boxed in by Hamas and others, and the conversation you've heard, no electricity, there's no food, there's no supplies, no nothing, right? This is the conversation that you have heard about the situation in Gaza. Now, this is, if I may, um
You're making me bite my tongue. You know this,
yes,
right?
I recognize that. Um this part right here, if I may, and let's see if I can get this, maybe try to make this look a little better or whatever. But this is,
Okay, you better find it quick because I'm raring to go.
I know.
Because
Okay, I don't. Well, I don't. You should be able to see it on the screen right now,
we
and I'm going to play this for you real
and this
quick.
is tragic and
Yeah.
awful, but it happens every fucking day here.
Right.
Every fucking week we get a school blown up. Every
Exactly.
goddamn day we get a fucking hospital blown up.
Right. And
The
again,
eyes of the world have turned away. Anyway,
well, and
I'm,
they were never.
proceed.
This is,
Sorry.
no, it's okay. I understand, and I'm saying this, and they were never on Sudan and Darfur right now. 2013, the world
Mm,
was up in arms about Sudan. Now, there are more people
okay.
killed in Sudan and in Sudan in the last 4 months that have been killed in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict in the last decade, including the people. Even if you take Hamas's numbers, and again, sexual violence, all that kind of stuff, and it's just kind of like meh. Well, here is footage of the Hamas leader being brought in. And I want people watching this to compare it to the footage that they have seen of civilian Palestinians being shown on camera by, from video, by the way, sent by Hamas out to the outer world, both through legit sources like acting like citizen journalists and sending stuff to CNN in New York or New York Times and that kind of stuff. This guy being brought in. Now, I'm going to turn the audio off because it's really friggin' loud. Um, but this guy, they bring him in this. Look at this. He's in this. Okay, they bring him out. I want you to and see the guy's beating the. Oh, hold shit. Hold on. I can't pause it the way I want to with my little buttons. Whatever. Okay. Look at the uniformed police officers that Hamas has as police. Look at every charged phone surrounding this dude. Do you see all the phone? It's like a friggin' concert. How many phones? And again, no electricity, no supplies. The hospitals are decimated. So
Mhm.
continuing, they bring him out and around. They're like walking him around. He ended up he was hit by he was in debris and that kind of stuff. He was able to walk, but he ultimately died inside the hospital a little bit later. They were bringing him in covered in dust, and it was partly, and the reason is, by the way, is because he was in one of the tunnels during one of the tunnel attacks, and they tunneled him out and brought him to an area with a functioning, well lit hospital. Look at all those people. First of all, the International Sausage Fest, Hamas Sausage Fest, is continuing apace. Because and I want you to look at like the amount of clean clothes and charged phones and overhead lighting and tile and ambulances and all this stuff that is not afforded, by the way, to the civilians that you will see in the other story I was just showing which shows civilians
Mhm.
walking past these decimated areas. This footage of a woman, this is the people. This is in Israel. This is a picture of all the hostages. But to see these folks right here, they show this footage of the Palestinians walking through the street, carrying their belongings, dragging each other. That's what the individual Palestinians are doing. This is where the women and children are. They're hoofing it back and forth with the older men. Everybody else is there.
Mhm.
That's the crucial difference. These guys, see that guy in the green, right there. I don't know if you can notice him. Whatever. There's several guys that meet
Mhm.
this Hamas leader. They're in fresh scrubs. Something you do not see in any of the other footage at any of the other hospitals where Palestinian civilians are being treated inside Gaza. This guy gets the clean spot. This guy gets the pampered treatment. And there's so many men there in support, enraged that they have to have their own cops beating these guys in the legs with sticks as they approach the ambulance. And you'll see, like right this. They're pushing these guys back because these guys are trying to either film him while he's being taken in, or they're just getting riled up because one of their leaders has been killed. And it's a big mix of stuff. This is Yeah, this is where they're bringing in other people. They're trying to clear this path so these guys can get in because they know he's coming in. But again, clean smock, clean smock, clean. It's one of those things where, and this is video they posted. This is Hamas
Mhm.
video, and look at the camera right here. Look at this guy's video camera right there. He's got a secondary monitor attached to the top of it. Like, this is not just people filming with their phones. This is a well-coordinated media effort inside Gaza by Hamas to
Mhm.
fabricate different messaging for different groups. Believe me, the footage of this guy going to the hospital and being taken care of and walking in alive into the hospital was for a different purpose entirely than the footage they send out of other people wounded, and the footage of like the people wrapped in white, where you can see the one guy blinking, and the girl covered in ketchup that's in the car who's like smearing on herself and looks at her dad. There's a bunch of these like Hamas wounded footage that they put out to try and because quite frankly the women and children have left largely, and so it's all men being killed. So to cover for this, they create these illusions of other footage they shoot in the south, and they tell it's in the north, and blah blah blah. And it's propaganda, and the Germans did it and the Russians do it, and it's just how it works. But I want people to remember that distinctly this, and it reminds me of like Putin talking about how we were attacked, we had to respond, we got
Mhm.
the the Russian people are being would be decimated. If the Ukrainians had a chance, they would kill us all. And none of us were doing any of that shit. There was no, you could argue that. I guess the strategy of Russia is to make Ukraine look like Hamas, or the European Union look like Hamas.
Sure. Well, think of all those, those Ukrainian Nazis,
Right.
holding up, Ukrainian flags
Hmm.
with a swastika in the middle, of it,
Yeah.
instead of the trident. And we know reasonably well, and because it's information warfare, there's always murkiness, but we know reasonably well those were actually Russian actors in the
Hmm.
Donbass
Yeah.
saying,
They're
"This is
literally filming it in
yeah,
the occupied territories. It was geolocated. One of them, by the way, one of those videos
yes, it
is one of the
was,
ones
yeah."
that led to a
The one with
strike.
the Sikh.
Yeah, that one led to a
Oh,
strike
that
on a
one.
building. Right?
No,
Yeah.
that's the journalist,
Mm,
quote unquote journalist, the
mm,
Russian journalist who was stupid enough to film live as they were firing
right.
a multiple
Well, there
launch
were
rocket
several.
system,
I'm talking about one
yeah,
last year.
yeah, it happens.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think we're talking about the same one.
Yeah.
I mean, it's information warfare, and this
Hmm.
is where I get really testy
Hmm.
when it comes to a lot of this stuff, because where does journalism end and information warfare begin?
Right.
Where is that line? Because that line must exist. If you acknowledge that there is a thing such as information warfare,
Mhm.
it has to be in the public sphere because you have to be putting out, these are emotional things, children being pulled from rubble, or, the footage you just showed, of
Mhm.
the hospital arrival. I mean, your initial instinct as a human being is to have empathy towards
Right.
other human beings, and you see this, and they know it, and they weaponize it.
Yeah.
So where does true, honest journalism end and information warfare begin? And this is a constant conversation we need to have.
Yep.
When people talk about Julian Assange,
Yeah.
is Julian Assange a journalist, or was he, and is he, a
Mhm.
useful idiot for the GRU in Moscow?
Mhm.
There is a line somewhere. If you recognize that information warfare is a thing, there is a line somewhere where journalism it stops being journalism and starts being information warfare.
Right, right.
And we see it all. I mean, the
Well,
guys,
that was the
the
distinction.
Hamas is
r
really good at it.
well, like,
Really,
the
really good at it.
distinction, and, again, Snowden, magically, and he has the Intercept and people associated with him, including Glenn Greenwald, to thank for him
Mhm.
being in Russia permanently, because
Yeah.
they either, funneled him there, with knowledge or forethought that he wouldn't be able to leave eventually, which is just totally fucked up. Or that's where he wanted to go, and they're just not saying because it totally screws their narrative or whatever. But either way,
Mm.
they're not speaking honestly about the entire thing. There's a veil of secrecy about, Greenwald and his crowd moving Snowden around, moving him to China first, and him losing 2 laptops, and then ending up in Russia with no exit visa, and then becoming a citizen, and like it's just this it's ridiculous. That said, and by the way, I'm fairly certain a chatbot is running his, has been running his Twitter, his shitter feed for a while. But the point is like, with Assange, the distinction between Assange and say everyone else at WikiLeaks, because again, not everyone at WikiLeaks is specifically in trouble the way Assange was. And the reason is Assange specifically, I think it was in terms of Chelsea Manning, directed her, who was, not the dead name, was a was a serving officer at that time, to go and get a piece of information and helped the process along. If you need help getting into the server, we can kind of give you tips or how, or angles on how to
Yep.
get in. That's not journalism. That's, again, there's a danger to that on a journalism level that's similar to, like, if the police could just hire people to break into your house and then get whatever information they want and go, "Hey, I found this when I when I broke into this person's house, but, and arrest me, give me 2 days, but here's all this other stuff. I'll give you dirt on the person of the house I broke into to get out of jail." And they would just
Mhm.
give plea deals to informants for breaking into your house. Like, that's the concern, and that's what it is. That's the distinction between, like, what you're saying, between journalism and advocacy, or specific, or spy work in that regard.
Mhm. Yep. There's a right before I came, to talk to you, I mean, in the last, well, now it's about an hour, but about an hour ago,
Hmm.
this is not exactly on topic, but
Hmm.
adjacent. The Kiev Post dropped a video interview with Lev Parnas.
Oh yeah.
Um, mhm, about an hour ago, and I've watched about half of it because I wasn't aware of it until about 10 minutes before I
Right.
was scheduled to come and talk with you, but I watched about half of it, and the reason I bring it up is because, Parnas says, that Giuliani knew very well that everybody he was talking to was a Russian agent.
Yeah.
That he was working with Russians inside Ukraine.
Yeah.
And he knew it, and he knew it. That Kardash, Firtash, all these different, guys that he was meeting to get, dirt on Hunter,
Hmm.
that they were all connected, or
Hmm.
that they were Russia. But he still came out with a narrative that he wanted to present.
Hmm.
That's not an honest broker.
No.
That's information warfare.
Right.
That's not, aside from the journalism question, are you being an honest broker? Are you really trying to disseminate factual information,
Hmm.
or are you trying to manipulate the people who will absorb the information that you put out in order to induce them to either through an emotional response or trick them intellectually into believing what you want them to believe? That's information warfare. That's not journalism.
Hmm.
That's not being and in, Julian never claimed to be a journalist, but he's also it's also important to note these things because you're not acting in good faith.
Well,
You're
here,
trying to
yeah,
manipulate your audience, and that's
here's
what Hamas is doing, and that's what
totally.
the Russians do.
Absolutely. I mean, that same thing around Bucha. Like they have eyewitnesses, DNA evidence, and dead bodies in Bucha. There is no question that the Russians that were there sexually assaulted women, murdered them, tortured them, killed their victims
Mhm.
after they did it. There's no question. There just isn't. Like it, and at a certain point, you have to go. You have a choice. You can either admit that that's what happened and deal with what that expands out into the Russian military operation. Was this on purpose? Was it something they looked the other way, which is a standard for the Russians, and therefore that would paint them in a different light than a fighting and occupying army that really had some idea that they were going to bring Russian democracy to Ukraine, that kind of bullshit. Um, or um, or about yourself. You have to admit something about yourself that you're cool with whitewashing that. And I'll give you another example. So this is an article
Yeah.
from the New York Times about the sexual violence, and this is just starting to get a story, carry
Mhm.
out. This is just starting to get a little bit of attention, which is good. That it's finally getting attention. And again, like I said, Bucha, we can talk about that again. So those scars aren't going away anytime soon for the women that experienced that, and the women and children that were killed, and the families that have to deal with the aftermath of that. And the idea that like Russia then went and recruited rapists and murderers and sent them in with the hope of kind of like, well, we'll use that kind of a terror campaign. There's more of them coming, right? The there Hamas on October 7th, and I can't stress this enough. Hamas bragged about the sexual violence that they committed on their Telegram channels that they've always used. This is not like suddenly, Israel took over their Telegram channels and through AI crafted these amazingly realistic snuff films. And then, involving real people from Hamas and fighters that they wouldn't have enough visual scans of to make or whatever. The, they bragged about it. They were proud of it. They put it online. It's
Mhm.
horrifying. And there was an
Mhm.
airing. There was a viewing of some of the footage at the Holocaust Museum here in Los Angeles, and a bunch of protesters showed up outside, like shouting anti-Semitic horseshit at people there. It was gross.
Mhm.
But look at
Mhm.
but you can trace that in the information warfare kind of conversation we're having to the title of this article, which is what we know about sexual violence during the October 7th attack on Israel. And the secondary title of this is Israel has accused Hamas of committing abuses against large numbers of women. Hamas denies the allegations. That none
Mhm.
of that is true. That secondary sentence there, none of that is true. Hamas showed themselves, again, proudly on video engaging in this stuff. Israel has multiple survivor witnesses that saw it, that watched these
Mhm.
atrocities happen from hiding, some of them children, for crying out loud.
Mhm.
And the idea that Hamas denies the allegations, like, A, they would know or admit to it or care,
Well,
and they
yeah,
brag, but they've said it would happen
with
again.
one
Right.
caveat.
Yeah.
With one caveat,
Hmm.
they'll deny it when they know it suits their purposes and
Right.
when they know which audience they are speaking to.
Right.
They'll revel in it when they're speaking when they think they're speaking to another audience,
Yeah.
when they think that it's speech that's going out to that there's a reason why, they put that kind of stuff out there. Same thing happens with the Russians.
Right.
Exact thing. Same
Hmm.
thing happens with the Russians.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Mm.
they will deny that, oh no, our Russian soldiers never did any of that kind of stuff. That's all just Western propaganda. There's no proof to it. But then also at the same time, they will speak within the Russian world and the
Hmm.
Russian speaking world.
Hold on. There we go. Sorry, I lost audio for one split second. Give me a second on this one, if I could. I don't know why that decided to just barf out for a second. Give me
And Donetsk and well,
now it's working. Sorry, one second. For some odd reason, we got a audio glitch on there real quick, if I may. Give me. Oh, there you are.
oh,
Now
did you lose me again?
I did. You're better. You're back now. There you go.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry.
Yeah.
It
I
was just
think I
glitching
think
out.
yeah, some glitching. Look, I mean, they just they'll revel in it when they want to use it for one purpose, and then they'll deny it to a different audience
Hmm.
when they want it. When they want that effect. It's information warfare.
Hmm.
It's media. It's also being media savvy, and we've spoken about this, you and I, many times, and
Hmm.
I'll say
Why is that being weird again? Sorry. The audio is dropping out on us, Phil, a little bit.
it's it
There we go.
woefully
There you go.
it's woefully bad how we teach our children and our citizenry how to absorb information and media. I
Right.
mean, we teach people how to read. We should be teaching people how to consume information.
Yeah.
Because it's easily manipulable. It's easy to manipulate it, but also if you get the codex, if you start to notice the things that need to be noticed, and to
We'll try and fix this.
I
There you go.
lost you this time
There you
now.
go. Now it's better. There you go.
Up.
Sorry.
We're having fun. Uh, we just need to teach ourselves, one another,
Yep.
how to consume media better,
Yep.
because you can combat this.
Yeah.
If you get an immediate visceral response, it might be that's the purpose, that
Right.
you are being emotionally manipulated. You always, dig a little deeper. Take a second
There
source
might
or a
even
third
be,
source.
yeah, there might even be a good reason to emotionally manipulate a crowd at some point. There might be a thing like people aren't taking this seriously. So that's how a lot of like narrative style journalism actually happens because it gets people interested in using real human emotion and the kind of interpersonal connections because in the abstract maybe the number of people killed in an area just looks like a number to you and you can't really grasp it, but one particular anecdote might pull you into story. I get that it has value sometimes. The problem is when it ultimately there's so much volume of it that it can be emotionally overwhelming, and what it causes is sort of it shuts people down that they ultimately just sort of give up on
Mm,
caring. I would argue that it's what I call the smoke 'em if you got 'em reflex that affects a lot of climate change coverage. A lot of people get so overwhelmed by the idea like I can't do shit about the environment, and if China's just going to crank out a bunch of coal, what can I possibly what's recycling going to do? So smoke them if you got them, fuck it. There's a point where
yeah.
people can feel so overwhelmed, and they don't have any options, so they just check out, and I got to
And
say I don't
there's
blame
also
them in that regard.
yeah, and then there's also the instances where once somebody has made a decision, whether it's based on an emotional or an intellectual manipulation,
Mhm.
that once they've come down on one side of the fence or the other,
Right.
that's where they're staying. And everything else then
Yeah.
has to fit that model because they've come to a conclusion. They've decided.
Mhm.
And it's the old Mark Twain, quote of, it's easier to fool somebody than it is to convince somebody, that he's been fooled, sort of
Yeah.
thing.
Mhm.
once somebody has been manipulated by this kind of information warfare, it is so much more difficult to pull them back and go, well, no, maybe the metrics and the narrative that you have adopted is wrong
Mhm.
because you've been manipulated. It happens.
Mhm.
The people who commit these kind of things, the GRU or Hamas or
Yeah.
whoever it is, they're really, really good at it. They're
Right.
really good at
They
it,
weaponize your own
and they know how
empathy
to
against
manipulate.
you. And again, the
Exactly.
sad part is
Yeah.
that good people are the most susceptible to some of this stuff because they actually do care. They actually do want the best
Mhm.
for some. But what
Well,
they've been
sure.
they've been kind of cornered into thinking that one way is the
Well, these are
best and or
awful
only way.
images.
Right. It's the only way
These
is
are
yeah.
awful,
Yep.
awful images, and they're terrible things. The children that are being pulled from the rubble. But then I also
Mhm.
now here's the difference. Here's the
Right.
difference, okay?
Yeah.
Is that and this is why I'm really upset with the press corps. The International Press Corps has
Yeah.
abandoned Ukraine, and it is disgraceful.
Mhm.
It is a to use a Jewish, Yiddish or Jewish word, it's a shanda.
Mhm.
It is absolute. I have been up to the Intercontinental Hotel. I have seen really the lack of, I was gonna say the coverage in
Right.
quotation marks, but really it is the lack of coverage. What's the last thing you've heard about Ukraine, Hal? I mean,
Footage. Well,
you're
me,
you're a bad
I
example,
am
but
terrible.
take
Yeah.
because you follow this stuff. I
Yes.
mean, those who don't expressly follow this stuff, but I ask your audience, what's the
Mhm.
last story you heard out of Ukraine?
Probably about
What's the last
funding
story
in the
you heard out of
United States.
Ukraine?
The biggest news we're hearing right now is
Sure,
whether or not
which is a domestic,
in the
right,
domestic funding bill that they're working on right now, whether border funding will be attached
right.
to Ukraine and Israel aid. That's the only, and it's being talked about like it's a fucking farm subsidy. That's so
Mhm,
weird. But
yeah,
that may be the very thing that saves it because the people, not only have the press moved on from Ukraine a little bit, so have the people who it was their primary target for a while. Because what you have in Marjorie Taylor Greene and Josh Hawley and these assholes, there tends to be, well, he's more pro Ukraine, I think, than most. Than Ted Cruz, for example. Attention seeking. So they don't really, now that Ukraine's kind of off the top list of villains in their news cycle right now, they're kind of leaving it alone. And as a matter of fact, because the vast majority of Americans support Ukraine help, without them
right.
attacking it all the time, it helps. Yeah,
But that's domestic within the United States.
right.
Did you, have you heard about what's happening out on the border with Poland? Have you heard about,
Why would the audio go away? Just do that.
like, Chat?
Yeah, there we go. There you go. Now you're good.
We're still gonna mess with
Yeah, it's just
gremlins in the
intermittent.
system.
Yeah,
I it but it but the press corps isn't here anymore. It's not, you're not,
right,
I mean, it's incredibly frustrating, but all of this plays into the way we consume information and what we prioritize and
that's right.
what is used against us with our empathy, and because the big guys, the ones who, now look, I saw the AP, I saw Reuters, the agencies are still here,
Yeah,
but the guys who have
on the
massive
ground.
operations,
Right.
and it's very expensive to do these things. You need to spend money, and sadly, we need to find a solution to
Yep.
this. We have to. I mean, when this war is done, maybe that'll be my next focus
Hmm.
is actually, let's see if we can fix our news,
Yeah.
sources and industry, frankly,
Hmm.
the news business, because the priority is financial.
Hmm.
It's not information, and it's still supposed to be. Call me naive, but I still believe that it's the fourth estate. I still think it.
Oops. Just being weird. There we go. Sorry. The audio is coming and going again. It's a very odd thing. Beg your pardon. Not quite sure why.
Yeah,
Oh, there it
I
is.
lost you.
There it is. Okay.
There we go.
Just, oh, wow,
Uh,
that's loud.
anyhow, I look. I don't know. I'm very frustrated with
Hmm.
with the way that the spotlight has moved away. And you're right, maybe there's an advantage to it, but there's also a disadvantage to it because, I mean, you're
Yeah,
not hearing
of
that the
course.
Ukrainians are on the left bank of the river,
Hmm.
which is hugely significant.
Right.
I mean, like,
Agreed.
all the last narrative you had probably about the Ukrainian counteroffensive, unless you're paying very close attention,
Hmm.
is the fact that it faltered. It was slow. It didn't advance as quickly as we would have liked. We
Right.
had all these ideas that they were gonna, and then they ran into mines and take traps and all the rest of it. But the counteroffensive, quote unquote, has never stopped.
Right.
But do you hear about them being on the left bank of the Dnieper and
No.
how important that is?
I do because I
No.
look for it, but no, not in
Right.
general. You're not. I mean,
Unless you're really paying
yeah,
attention, the last piece of narrative you heard about the Ukrainian armed forces is that they hit a wall, and despite
it's stalled out.
everything we gave them, it stalled out, and it was, well, that's not true.
Right. Agreed.
That's not true because more things have happened since October 7th in Ukraine, while the world's attention switched down to, and I can even get more accusatory towards the large corporations because I know I worked inside the belly of the beast
Right.
for, 25 years. I worked in broadcast news.
Hmm.
And there and I will add to this, and it's not something I want to dwell on, but I will add to the fact that they have infrastructure in Israel. These news organizations have news bureaus, you know, in Jerusalem.
Weird audio fart. Sorry, there it is again. But we're back. 1 second. And usually it seems like Phil.
Recurring
There you go.
story.
Yeah, you go.
Yep, there we go. I'm back. Okay,
Okay.
it's a recurring story. So the networks have put money down there,
Yeah.
and they have infrastructure down there, and they have personnel down there.
Hmm.
They're building out of scratch the coverage for
Right.
Ukraine, and that is a very pricey thing.
Coding. Hold on one
Am I
second.
back? Am I
Yep.
going?
There you go. You're better.
There you are.
There you
There
go.
we go. Yeah, there we go.
Yeah. Yeah.
Anyhow, I don't know. Look, it's just, you know, I'm frustrated by the coverage here,
Yeah.
or the lack thereof.
Understandable.
I mean, I'm still here. I put up a vlog yesterday, an interview with a really fascinating American woman
Hmm.
who
It's just gonna be dicking with me all morning, isn't it? That's just what's gonna happen. We're just gonna have to. We're just like we do these. To think about it for a
I
second.
think it's
There you
a
go.
bandwidth.
It might
I
be.
think we might have a it's a bandwidth thing, I think.
I
It
think so.
seems to me.
It's yeah. It seems to like have these fits and starts. It's super fun. Well, and I will tell you what. I'll call it to a close today on that note and
Sure.
try to get my see if I can figure out another opportunity for doing my show this afternoon, and then of course because I got to do the show Saturday, I will be doing it here, but not here in California. So in moving around, but on a very important note,
Well,
I think. Yeah.
check out my vlog check out just check out the vlog. It was a really good interview
Yeah.
with this woman, Rima Zaritis. She's a American of Lithuanian descent, so she
Hold. Hold it. Oh, there we go. Okay, we're back, and then you'll be back. Yeah, it seems it is a bandwidth going back and forth to you. I think.
yeah, check out the interview. It is. So real quickly, check out the vlog, with this interview with a American woman of Lithuanian descent. Her family knows what it's like to live under the thumb of Moscow, and so that's why she's here doing what she can to help. It's a really good interview.
Excellent.
Secondly, go check out 20 Days in Mariupol. You can see it on YouTube.
Excellent.
And just,
And we'll pick up
also, uh,
yeah.
we'll pick up today is the National Day for the Armed Forces of Ukraine. So,
Hmm.
thank you, Armed Forces of Ukraine.
Hmm.
It's their national holiday. And there is a growing story, and I want people to be very aware of it, is that as best they can, that there is the Russians have realized that they cannot destroy Ukrainian infrastructure, so they're trying to draw divisions between internally in Ukraine and internationally between the Ukraine.
There it is. Yeah, it's like we can time it now. Yeah, but yes.
Yeah, yeah,
So
yeah. Okay,
uh,
bud.
it's
It
specifically a
is what it
bandwidth
is.
back and forth thing. That's clearly what it
I
is.
think so.
So I'll see if I can remedy it. I know I'll be able to remedy it by Saturday because I won't be here on Saturday. I'll be at another place, so it'll be better. But again, yes, Russia is losing, and America's not going to waver. And as much as the Marjorie Taylor Greens and those others, would want to attack it, they're failing miserably internally. We just need to make sure that the American people don't sort of forget about Ukraine in
Yeah.
the interim if there is a crunch point that comes up. And I appreciate you
And
being
if you
there.
hear about divisions internally within Ukraine or between Ukraine and West, it's being instigated because the Russians know they can't beat us with missiles.
That's right. That's right. And it's the same thing over here. That's the division that they're trying to do. And the same thing would work,
Mhm.
I would argue, is
And
the
it's purposeful.
Hamas, they call it Pollywood, the Palestinian Hollywood, where they create this narrative, this idea that, genocide, apartheid, open air prison, all those things take hold because Americans give a damn and they're effective because we care. And and that also means we can be manipulated. And you just have to be aware of that so you don't ultimately lose those emotions and end up like Claire at the end of Scrooged. Somebody came along and told me, cut him loose, Claire. You know, they're just holding you back. And that's when it gets bad. When people allow their goodness to be weaponized by somebody else, and then there's an embarrassing point where you just disassociate, you just disengage. So,
Yeah.
Philip Itner, thanks so much. Check out
All right,
him on
guys.
YouTube. You can do a search for Philip Itner, and you'll see his vlogs come up. Of course, you can follow him at Itner Philip on Threads. And are you Philip Itner on? I'm sorry. Are you Philip Itner on Threads, or you're Itner Philip on Shitter? I know that,
I'm in.
but
I'm also on Threads.
okay, great. So
Just
there's
the
a uniformity of
consistency.
it. Itner Philip everywhere. Okay,
Yep.
cool. So thanks so much, buddy, and I'll see you on Saturday. And thanks so much for putting up with
Yep.
the
Take
tech
care, everyone.
issues. All right,
It
cheers.
happens.
Yep, it
It
does.
happens.
It
All right.
does. Okay, be
Yep.
well.
See you later.
Cheers.
All right. You
And
too.
there he goes, everybody. Thanks so much. It's a lot of heavy lifting, I think, for this computer. Part of it might be that both between the bandwidth issues that we have and the this computer, once I run a 2-hour show, starts to get hot, especially when it involves pulling in audio and video from another site and putting it in. That it has to have like 3 up and running video sources to get a guest on the air, and so it takes a lot. So I'm gonna see if I can find a workaround. Saturday I may just have to use Ecamm to do the show. Chicago's always a factor in that, but we can find a workaround for that. I hope. Anyways, but you guys are wonderful, and I want to thank you for being with me this morning and suffering through the glitchiness of it all. And hopefully, and I will be on this afternoon, and it will be a lot smoother because it doesn't require as much uh, computer power to do the clips and stuff as it does to have a guest on, especially in an interview capacity like that. So, anyways, appreciate you guys so much, and see you later. I'm gonna go try and fix it. Why does it have to be so hard? It shouldn't. It's almost 2024. God damn.